Welcome back. All right, so I didn't watch the Jim Benning uh, press conference because I honestly find them kind of, well, depressing on some level. But I'm going to go through what's been reported so far that he said, kind of the bullet points, and we'll discuss that. But first off, Brent Seabrook's announced what we were all kind of worried was coming. Seabrook has dealt with injuries for years. And at some point in time, your body says that's it. And certain injuries are not those that you can recover from. So Seabrook's retiring. He'll stay on long-term injury reserve for the rest of his contract. For anybody wondering, this does mean that Chicago does not need to protect him in the upcoming expansion draft. He will have missed enough games. They can declare him to have a career-ending injury or career-threatening injury, and they don't need to protect him. So it frees up one spot for Chicago. He does have a no movement clause. There's all those things, but because they can claim a career-threatening injury and the amount of games he'll have missed by then, they don't have to worry about protecting him. So, all the best to Brent Seabrook. At some point, I will do a career video on Brent Seabrook. Interesting figure, and Duncan Keith's been hanging out with him since he decided to make this decision. Stated that Duncan Keith was his best friend. So, all the best to Seabrook. I will say that the new kids playing for Chicago's blue line have been pretty good so far. So, Chicago's defense, which was considered a weakness as recently as I'll say 2 years ago, it's one of their strengths now. I also wanted to throw in here a condolence to Wayne Gretzky and his family and Walter Gretzky's friends here as everybody's hockey dad passed away. And I remember very well in the 80s, wherever Wayne was, you'd see Walter. And it was just kind of a standard thing. And of course, one of the most famous, recognizable people in this country. So, again, my condolences to Walter's entire family, to Wayne and his, of course. And it is a shame. He was 82, I believe, at the time he passed on. So, all the best to his family in this time. Coming out of, there is no way to transition from that into something else. So I'll just state that last night there was an odd thing that happened. Department of Player Safety does things in an odd way, where I always get notified. There's not many things that I get notified of on Twitter, but if Player Safety tweets something out, the notification goes to my phone because I know that means it's suspension or fine. So while I'm watching games, I get a notification from Player Safety, and I'm like, that's odd timing. Did they rescind a suspension? What's going on? They had fined Brent Pesce $5,000 for a trip on Robbie Fabry from last night's Detroit game within, I think, an hour of the game finishing. So that was quick. And again, it just makes you wonder why things are like. Was George Peros watching the game? He's like, well, that's $5,000. Like it's one of those oddities. We don't really see how NHL Department of Player Safety works, and we're all kind of left guessing sometimes. But the immediate tweet on the $5,000, he might have still been getting changed. Had other guys in the locker room go, "Hey, look, you lost $5,000 tonight. You tripped Robbie Fabry. Why'd you do that?" All right, so that being said, let's move on to general managers in Canada. Before this season started, Paul Maurice said that with the amount of scrutiny on the Canadian teams, he expected 5 coaches to get fired in the Northern Division this year. Well, we're up to 2. And it doesn't sound like the Canucks are likely to make any kind of change. So Jim Benning had a press conference today in which he said exactly what I figured he would say. Not much. What's Jim Benning going to do? Is Jim Benning going to stand there in front of the press or sit there in front of the press and say, yeah, so I screwed everything up. We lost some key guys. We lost Tanev and Toffoli. We really missed those guys. Markstrom, boy, if we still had Markstrom and Demko, we might actually be in the running for the playoffs right now. But he wanted a no movement clause, so we couldn't talk him out of that. And yeah, Stetcher was really popular in the locker room, and we might have been able to keep him too. But spending all that money in the bottom 6. And we're pretty sure Louis Eriksson's going to take... Like, what is he going to do? Like, it's... But it is frustrating. I get it. And the quote here that I don't have on the board is, in 2 years' time, I think we're going to be real competitive. What? What? Imagine doing a job for 7 years and going, hey, I know it looks like I haven't finished that car that you told me to build for you, but give me a couple more years. Uh, that's the steering wheel, right? Anyway, so yeah, Benning's not firing Travis Green. Act surprised. I have been saying for weeks, nothing's going to change. That I am convinced nothing's going to change with Vancouver. That it's just going to be business as usual. He talked about how the pandemic changed everything because instead of being in the Pacific, they're in the North. I'm not sure how that works. Like, yes, they'd be playing against California teams. The schedule would be different. Maybe the record would be a little better, but they'd still be in this position. They would still not be as good as Vegas. They would still be behind, in all likelihood, Edmonton, probably Calgary as well. Like, it's not like it's that different if you're in the Pacific rather than in the North. I don't think losing Ottawa and gaining Vegas necessarily means more wins. And California's been an issue for Vancouver in the past when it comes. I mean, last year it wasn't. Last year was great, but again, he believes that adversity is good long term. I hear that and I think, wow, wow, really. I remember when I was a kid, there was a talk show that said that if you grow up in a home that's untidy, not like filthy, but an untidy home, and you're not in one of these homes where it's always hypoallergenic everything and clean everything all the time and sanitize all the time, that you'll have a better immunity system. I remember looking around and saying to my mother, I would like to thank you for building my immunity system. I really appreciate it. She called me a smartass. So, if adversity long term is a good thing, then these Canucks should be Stanley Cup champions as soon as they're good, because there's been a lot of adversity, a ton, and it's always the same. It's always the same things. It's always the same things that get said. There's nothing new here. They're looking at re-signing Pearson. Of course they are. Of course they are. Because the other thing that gets frustrating is when you see players leave, right? And you're like, those were good players. And the other guys who stick around are the ones that fans have been saying, these are the changes that need to happen. And you've got a general manager going, I've decided to stay the course. I've decided that staying the course is the way to go with this. So, yeah. The restricted free agents, which are Pettersson, Hughes, and Demko, they're not going to work on that until after the trade deadline. Good. You want to make sure that you delay those as long as possible. Awesome. So not until April 12th. It's good, right? Good. They're also looking at internally, so looking for improvement from within. That's great. That's fantastic. So, yeah. Living day to day is a quote that everybody on Twitter really liked. Like, what does that mean? We're living day to day. Everybody's living. It's not like anybody's out there having a seven. I don't even know how to change that. Like, everybody lives day to day. It's such a ridiculous thing to say. And he's preaching patience. 2 years time, I think you're gonna be real competitive. Thanks, Jim. Thanks. There you go. Hashtag thanks, Jim. Thanks. So, Buffalo fans, I feel you right now. We're going to talk about that again, too. Calgary. So, talking about teams that decided it's not acceptable to be mediocre when you were expected to be better than that. Daryl Sutter will arrive in Calgary on Monday. He'll be running the practices as of Tuesday. He has to go through quarantine at the border. And there are a lot of talks about how this has been percolating for a while. The decision to replace Jeff Ward was made a while ago, like about a week ago, that Brad Treliving decided he'd seen enough, but that the actual announcement was last night. So until then, Ryan Huska will be the fill-in coach this weekend against Edmonton. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how things go for the Flames, a team that has now got its coach fired. The Bill Peters situation wasn't that they got a coach fired. In this case, the coach was fired because the team was underachieving, and we'll see how they respond. Some teams respond really well, others don't. But for Flames fans, at least you have a GM that's willing to, make this move. And he might be protecting himself and might be about keeping his job, but it sounds better than we'll be good in a couple years. And rightfully, there's fans on Twitter saying, but I thought we were good in the playoffs this year. I thought we were building. I thought things were getting better. So for Calgary, they're saying step back is not acceptable. Thank you. And I had to say my favorite comment on this channel last night, no offense to anybody else, was the one that said, by hiring Daryl Sutter, they're really taking this retro night seriously. Yeah. Yeah. Can't wait till they're wearing a Blasty jersey and Daryl Sutter's behind the bench. You can just have all these flashbacks to the early 2000s. So which brings me to this, which is that Ralph Krueger is really being seen as the next guy who may get the axe. And when he was asked today about, how to improve things, his answer is basically, that's up to the GM. He has to decide how to improve things. I'm just the coach. Okay. So the interesting thing with Krueger is this. So, he had the 1 year last year, and then that didn't pan out so much, but they keep him around for this year. Hall signed to play for him, right? Hall said one of his best years in Edmonton was when Krueger was the coach of the Oilers. So if Krueger goes, I think that means Hall would probably go as well. And I'm not going to be surprised if Hall's decided Buffalo's not the place for him. And there are people once again dragging Hall for saying, hey, I'm going to Buffalo because I want to win. I'm going somewhere to win. In his defense, they'd added Eric Stahl. The team on paper looked good. Just the results on the ice haven't been quite the same. And so I think the next coach to go is probably going to be the Buffalo coach. I'll say, yeah, probably. But again, this is the National Hockey League. Things can be kind of unpredictable. I don't think we had Calgary's coaches necessarily next. I mean, there were a lot of Calgary fans that weren't happy, but I think for most of us, we saw Krueger as being in danger. Or maybe Travis Green in Vancouver, and that's not happening. So yeah, it's further unease, it's further unrest. It'll be interesting to see how much money Taylor Hall gets this summer. Does he get another $8 million, or does the team look at his stats from this year and the year before and say, we think you're worth about $4 million? And is that where we end up? Because again, Hall's stats seem to be coming down, and it definitely looks like it's a trend. And if he's going to want to win somewhere, he may need to take less money, because a lot of the teams that are contenders, even though we'll have another year of contracts coming off, there's still going to be a lot of teams that are cap strapped next season as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation where I've got Vancouver and Buffalo on the board that I've talked about plenty lately. Calgary right in the middle, where at least they're trying. And I know there's Flames fans that aren't all that excited about Sutter. I've already seen posts talking about, remember when Daryl Sutter was in LA and they locked him out of a players meeting and completely blocked off the door so he couldn't get in. Yep, and Sutter will eventually have that impact where he is, but initially out of the gate, he's a positive. And they did win a couple of Stanley Cups in LA before that happened. So we'll see when coaching changes finally start to happen in places that we're expecting them. Because Montreal was kind of a surprise in that Julian had a heart attack or heart condition, and came back and was coach during a season where he would have been forgiven for saying, for health reasons, I'm bowing out, and now Ward is out in Calgary, while Krueger still has a job. And of course in Detroit, if you're keeping count, Jeff Blashill's outlasted almost every coach in the league. At least it feels that way now, and I don't think there's any plans to make any changes in Detroit either. You know what, though? I would also make the argument Detroit's playing pretty well. It's just the roster they have isn't really as good as they need it to be yet to win. So I totally am fine with Blashill sticking around. But there may be Red Wing fans that disagree. So which coach is next? There's your question. Is it David Quinn? Is it going to be John Hines? Which coach is next? And the other question, too, becomes, is Jim Benning making a point that makes sense in talking about how the schedule's different, the teams are different, everything's different this year than a normal regular season, so you have to kind of take that into consideration? Or is it more smoke? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.